December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. 353 Japanese aircraft descend on a quiet Sunday morning in Hawaii, catching the U.S. Pacific Fleet completely off guard. Battleships sink, airfields burn. Over 2,400 Americans die before breakfast is finished. The attack drags the United States into the deadliest conflict in human history. But what if someone knew it was coming? What if, instead of sailors in their bunks and pilots still rubbing sleep from their eyes, Pearl Harbor had something waiting in those waters that Japan never anticipated? What if the Navy had sent back a SEAL team, not to start a war, but to stop a massacre? Could a handful of the most elite warriors ever trained change the outcome of December 7th? Could they turn history's most devastating surprise attack into something else entirely? Let's find out. First, some context, because Pearl Harbor didn't happen in a vacuum. Japan had been expanding aggressively across Asia and the Pacific for years. China, Manchuria, French Indochina, all falling under Japanese control while the world was too distracted by Europe to pay much attention. The United States responded with economic pressure, freezing Japanese assets and cutting off oil exports. Japan imported roughly 80% of its oil. That's not an inconvenience. That's an existential threat. Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, one of the most brilliant naval strategists of the 20th century, knew Japan couldn't win a prolonged war against America's industrial might. So his plan was bold, almost reckless. Neutralize the Pacific Fleet in one devastating blow before the U.S. could respond. Knock out the battleships, destroy the airfields, cripple American naval power long enough for Japan to seize the resources it needed across Southeast Asia. It nearly worked perfectly. Now, enter our SEALs. For this scenario, we're sending back a standard SEAL platoon. 16 operators broken into 4-man squads, each one a walking weapons system with about a decade of training behind him. Night vision, suppressed weapons, underwater demolition expertise, tactical communication, the whole package. The mission brief is simple to state and nearly impossible to execute. Defend Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, with no outside support, no modern infrastructure, and absolutely no way to convince anyone what's about to happen without sounding completely insane. Hey Admiral Kimmel, Japanese aircraft are going to attack at 7:55 a.m. Sunday. We're from the future. Also, can we borrow some jeeps? Yeah. That conversation goes poorly. So our SEALs do what SEALs actually do best. They don't ask permission. They assess the environment, identify the highest value threats, and start working the problem quietly. The first challenge is the most underrated one, the approach. Pearl Harbor in early December 1941 is a functioning military installation with patrols, checkpoints, and suspicious officers who very much want to know who you are and why you're carrying weapons that don't exist yet. Our team infiltrates at night, using small inflatable boats to come ashore on the quieter southwestern side of Ford Island. 16 men in civilian clothes, gear stashed in waterproof bags, moving through the dark like they own the place. Because in about 72 hours, they kind of will. They spend the first 2 days doing what special operations forces do before any direct action mission: reconnaissance, mapping the harbor, counting aircraft at Hickam and Wheeler fields, noting patrol timings, guard rotations, and most importantly, where the Japanese midget submarines are likely to attempt entry into the harbor channel. Yes, submarines. Because Japan didn't just send aircraft. 5 midget submarines were dispatched ahead of the main attack, tasked with slipping into Pearl Harbor and torpedoing ships during the confusion. One was actually detected and sunk by the USS Ward before the air attack even began, a warning that got ignored. Our SEALs are not going to ignore it. Let's talk about what these 16 men are actually carrying, because the hardware matters here. Each operator has a suppressed HK-4116 carbine, sidearm, and enough ammunition for several sustained engagements. 2 operators per squad carry M249 light machine guns. The team's 2 snipers are equipped with Mk13 rifles, effective well past 1,000 meters. And crucially, the combat divers in the group are carrying underwater demolition charges, closed-circuit rebreathers, and diver propulsion vehicles, silent, invisible, and extremely dangerous underwater. Against them, Japan is sending aircraft armed with torpedoes specifically modified to run shallow in Pearl Harbor's 40-foot depth, dive bombers with 800-kilogram armor-piercing bombs, and low-level horizontal bombers flying in tight, predictable formations. Predictable is a beautiful word when you have a sniper. The night before the attack, the SEALs split their assets. 2 4-man squads go into the water. Their job is the midget submarines. Using their DPVs and underwater charges, they patrol the harbor entrance through the early morning hours. When the first Japanese submarine makes its approach around 3 a.m., It doesn't make it very far. 2 operators attach demolition charges to the hull and back away. The detonation is small, controlled, and looks like a mechanical failure to anyone watching from shore. The second submarine meets a similar fate. 3 others are intercepted closer to dawn. One escapes into the harbor but runs aground on the reef before causing any damage, which, historically, actually happened anyway. Our divers just made sure the others never got that far. 0 torpedoes launched from below. That's the harbor's underwater threat largely neutralized before sunrise. Meanwhile, the remaining 2 squads are dealing with a much louder problem. America's radar operators at Opana Point actually did detect the incoming Japanese aircraft at 7:02 a.m., 136 planes on their scope. A lieutenant told them it was probably just a flight of B-17s expected from California and to not worry about it. History's most expensive, don't worry about it. Our SEALs can't shoot down 353 aircraft with 16 men, but they can make sure the warning gets through. One 2-man element has quietly tipped off a sympathetic signals officer, just enough for him to take the incoming radar contact seriously. When it appears on December 7th, alarms sound 40 minutes early, pilots scramble, anti-aircraft crews man their guns. 40 minutes isn't enough to win a battle, but it's enough to survive one. The first wave arrives at 7:55 to find American fighters already airborne, 24 P-40s and P-36s out of Halewa, a field the Japanese never bothered targeting. 2 SEAL machine gun teams are positioned on the Ford Island control tower. When the torpedo bombers come in low and slow, they fly straight into 800 rounds per minute at point-blank range. Formations break, runs get aborted. The damage is still severe, the Arizona still burns, men still die, 16 men cannot stop 353 aircraft. But here's what's different. The garrison fought back. The losses on both sides shift, the psychological calculus shifts. Pearl Harbor still happens, it just doesn't go quite the way Japan planned. Historically, the Japanese attack achieved near total surprise, sinking or damaging 19 ships, destroying 188 aircraft, and killing 2,403 Americans. In our scenario, the midget submarines are neutralized. Early warning gives crews time to respond, the torpedo run on Battleship Row is disrupted, and Japanese aircraft losses climb from 29 to roughly 80 or more. The USS Oklahoma never takes her fatal hits, and the carriers, Enterprise, Lexington, and Saratoga, stay out of port and stay ready. But winning the morning doesn't win the war. Japan still needs resources. They still have a powerful navy. Pearl Harbor still brings America in. What changes is how America enters. Not wounded, not humiliated. The Pacific Fleet is damaged but not broken. Japan's planners, counting on 6 months of US paralysis, find their timeline dramatically compressed. Midway comes earlier. The entire arc of the Pacific War bends. Could 16 men have stopped Pearl Harbor? No. The attack was too large, the warning too late, but change it, meaningfully, consequentially? Absolutely. Sometimes you don't need to win the battle. You just need to survive it well enough to win the war.